They didn't admire me, they studied me. That's the difference no one warns you about. You think power makes people respect you. It doesn't. It makes them careful, calculated. Every smile has a purpose, every handshake has weight. And if you're not paying attention, you start confusing strategy for connection. I learned that the hard way. There's this night I can't shake. One of those polished, expensive evenings where everything looks like a movie. Soft jazz in the background, glass walls overlooking a city that never admits it's tired. I was standing in the center of it, surrounded by people who needed something from me, and I gave it to them. Advice, access, opportunities. I was generous like that, or at least I told myself I was. But here's the truth I didn't want to face. I wasn't giving. I was maintaining control, because as long as they needed me, they wouldn't leave. You ever realize you built your entire life around making sure no one has the power to walk away? That's not strength. That's fear, dressed well. I remember catching my reflection in the glass that night. Perfect suit, relaxed posture, that calm, unshakable presence I spent years mastering. The kind of man people describe as solid. But I knew what it took to hold that image together. The discipline, the restraint, the constant filtering of emotion so nothing leaks out that could be used against me. And in that moment, I had a thought I couldn't shake. If they knew what was really going on in my head, would they still stand this close? Because beneath all that control, there was noise. Doubt I never voiced. Loneliness I never admitted. A quiet, persistent question that kept getting louder every year. Is this all I am to them? A resource? A position, a man they orbit, but never reach. And the more I succeeded, the worse it got. That's the part nobody tells you. Winning doesn't solve loneliness. It refines it, makes it sharper, more precise. Because now you can't even complain without sounding ungrateful. So you stay silent, you play the role, you become exactly who they expect, until you forget who you were before all of it. There was a time, I barely remember it, when I laughed without calculating how it sounded, when I spoke without weighing the impact, when being around people didn't feel like managing outcomes. But that version of me, he didn't survive. I outgrew him. Or maybe I buried him. I still don't know which one is true. Here's something uncomfortable, something most people won't admit. The more valuable you become, the less people risk being honest with you. They agree faster. They challenge less. They keep things light, safe, distant. And slowly, without realizing it, you become surrounded by people who are close to your life, but nowhere near your truth. That kind of isolation doesn't look like loneliness. It looks like success. That's why it's dangerous, because no one questions it. Not even you. Until moments slip through, small ones. Like when the room empties and the silence hits differently, or when you say something real, just once, and it lands wrong because no one's used to that version of you. And you pull back immediately, correct it, smooth it over, return to the version of yourself that works. That's the trap. You become irreplaceable in everyone's life, except in your own. Tell me something. When was the last time you felt seen without having to prove anything first? Not admired, not respected, seen. Because I can tell you exactly when it stopped for me, even if I pretend I don't remember. And the worst part? I chose it. Every promotion, every deal, every moment I decided control mattered more than connection. I reinforced it. I built a life that couldn't be shaken. And in the process, I removed every reason for someone to reach in and touch something real. There's a cost to being untouchable. No one tells you what it is until it's already taken everything quietly. And if I'm being honest, there's something else I've never fully said out loud. I don't think I was afraid of people leaving. I think I was afraid of what they'd find if they stayed long enough. Because if someone actually got close, if they looked past the control, the precision, the image, they'd see the part of me that doesn't feel like enough. And once that's exposed, you don't get to hide behind power anymore. You don't get to control how they see you. You just stand there, unfiltered. And that kind of exposure, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like risk, the kind that changes everything. And I wasn't ready for that. Not then. Maybe not even now. Because what happened next, what she saw the first time she really looked at me, I still don't know if that was the moment everything started to break, or the moment something finally started to wake up. Silence doesn't break you the way noise does. It reveals you. That night there was no warning, no failure, no loss, no dramatic unraveling anyone could point to and say, that's when it happened. Everything was working. Every system I built was running exactly the way it was supposed to, and that's what made it dangerous. It was late, past the hour where the city pretends to sleep but never really does. The lights outside my window were still alive, flickering like 1,000 unfinished stories. Inside, nothing moved, no music, no notifications, no distractions left to hide behind, just me, and a glass of something I didn't even taste. I remember sitting there, leaning forward slightly, elbows on my knees, staring at the reflection of a man I didn't feel connected to anymore. He looked composed, untouched, like nothing could reach him, but I knew better, because inside something was off. Not loud, not chaotic, just empty. Have you ever felt that? Not sadness, not pain, just a quiet absence where something used to be. It's worse than breaking, because at least when you break, you know you're still alive. I tried to shake it off at first, picked up my phone, scrolled through messages, names, numbers, opportunities, people asking for things, offering things, aligning themselves with me like I was some kind of center of gravity. And for a second, it worked. I felt needed again, important, in control. Then I put the phone down, and it came back, stronger. That emptiness doesn't disappear when you distract yourself. It waits, patient, precise, like it knows you'll come back eventually, and when you do, it's right there, unchanged. I leaned back, exhaled slowly, and asked myself something I had been avoiding for years. If all of this disappeared tomorrow, who would still choose me? Not the position, not the access, not the version of me that makes their lives easier. Me. The thought hit harder than anything I'd faced in business, in competition, in life, because for the first time, I didn't have an answer, and that's when it shifted. That's when the room started to feel different, bigger, colder, like the walls had moved just slightly further away, like I was sitting in the middle of something I built, but didn't belong to. I stood up, walked toward the window, placed my hand against the glass. Cold, real, grounding. But even that didn't pull me back, because the truth was already there, sitting with me in that silence. I had mastered being seen without ever being known. That's the kind of realization that doesn't explode. It settles, slowly, like something sinking deeper into you, finding its place whether you want it to or not. And I hated it. Not because it was painful, but because it was accurate. Every decision I made, every move calculated, every version of myself I presented to the world, it worked, it got results, but it also created distance. And I told myself that distance was necessary, strategic, smart. But that night, I couldn't hide behind those words anymore, because the cost was sitting right in front of me, unavoidable, unfiltered. I walked back to the center of the room, stopped, and just stood there. No plan, no next move, no script. Just a man realizing that everything he built couldn't answer the one question that actually mattered. That's when something in me cracked, not visibly. You wouldn't have seen it if you were there. But internally, control slipped. Just enough. And in that small gap, something honest came through. A thought I had buried so deep, I almost didn't recognize it. I don't think anyone would feel it. Not truly, not in the way that matters, and the moment that thought settled in, everything went quiet in a way I had never experienced before. Not peaceful, final, like a door closing somewhere inside me. Tell me something. What's more dangerous, losing everything you built, or realizing it never gave you what you thought it would? Because I used to think collapse looked like failure. Now I know. Sometimes it looks like success that no longer means anything. I sank back into the chair, ran a hand over my face, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't have an answer. No strategy, no solution, no way to control what I was feeling. Just a question I couldn't escape. And that's when it got worse. Because once you see it, once you actually allow yourself to face that kind of truth, you can't unsee it. You carry it into every conversation, every room, every interaction that suddenly feels thinner, less real. And I realized something else in that moment, something even more uncomfortable. I didn't know how to let anyone in anymore. Not really. I knew how to lead, how to influence, how to command attention. But connection? That required something I hadn't used in years. Honesty. And I wasn't sure I had that left in me. That was the collapse. Not loud, not visible, but absolute. And I stayed there, longer than I want to admit, sitting in that silence, holding a truth I didn't know what to do with, until something shifted. Subtle, almost unnoticeable, a presence, a change in the air, and I didn't realize it yet. But that was the exact moment everything I thought I understood about control was about to be challenged by something I wasn't prepared for. Something I couldn't manage. And that's where it begins to get complicated. She didn't walk in like a moment. She arrived like a disruption. no announcement, no shift in the room that anyone else would notice, but I felt it. You ever sense when something changes before you can explain it? That was it. I didn't turn immediately. I stayed still, eyes forward, pretending nothing had moved. Because instinctively, I knew this wasn't something I could control the way I controlled everything else. And that alone made me uneasy. When I finally looked, really looked, it wasn't what I expected. No performance, no effort to impress, no subtle positioning to get closer to me like everyone else did. She stood slightly apart, like the room didn't define her, like she didn't need anything from it, or from me. That was the first crack in my certainty, because I didn't know how to read that. I'm used to understanding people quickly. Motivations, angles, intentions. It's second nature. It's how I built everything, how I stayed ahead. But her, nothing aligned, no signal to follow, no leverage to hold, just presence. And then she did something small, almost insignificant. She looked at me, not at the image, not at the role I was playing in that moment, at me. And I felt it immediately, that shift, subtle but undeniable, like she wasn't trying to figure out what I could offer. She was trying to understand what I was hiding. That kind of attention, it's invasive. Not physically, internally. I remember thinking, don't engage, not because I wasn't curious, but because I was. And curiosity, in my world, leads to exposure. But she didn't move toward me, didn't initiate anything. She just stayed where she was, and somehow that made it harder to ignore. Because when someone chases you, you have control. When they don't, you start questioning why. That's when I made the decision. I walked over, slow, measured, intentional, every step calculated the way it always is. I stopped just close enough to acknowledge her presence without giving anything away. Enjoying the night? I asked. Simple, neutral, controlled. She glanced at me for half a second, then looked away again. Depends, she said quietly. Is this what you call real? That wasn't a normal response. Not in my world. Most people would have smiled, played along, tried to match my energy. But she didn't. She challenged it. And I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, something else, something unfamiliar, because her question wasn't about the room, it was about me. And for a moment, just a moment, I didn't have a response ready. That doesn't happen to me, ever. So I did what I always do. I deflected, gave a controlled answer, redirected the conversation, shifted the focus away from anything that could get too close, and it worked, externally. But internally, something had already slipped. Because I couldn't stop thinking about the way she said it, like she already knew the answer, like she wasn't impressed by any of it, including me. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When someone sees through you, your first instinct isn't connection, it's defense, and I felt it immediately. Walls going up, filters tightening, every word I said becoming more precise, more distant, more protected. Because if she could see past the image that easily, what else could she see? That thought didn't sit well with me. At all. So I tested her, subtly, shifted the tone, applied pressure, the kind of conversational moves that usually reveal people quickly. You'd be surprised how easy it is to make someone show you who they are when you know where to push. But she didn't react the way I expected, no need to prove herself, no attempt to match me. She stayed, steady, unmoved, and that's when it hit me. She wasn't playing the same game, which meant everything I relied on to stay in control didn't apply here. Do you know what that feels like? To be the strongest presence in every room, and suddenly realize your strength doesn't work on one person. It's disorienting, and if you're not careful, it's dangerous. Because for the first time, I wasn't leading the interaction, I was responding. And I didn't like that. Not because I needed dominance for ego, but because control is how I protect myself, and without it, there's risk, exposure, possibility. I started to pull back, subtly at first. Then more deliberately, shorter responses, less engagement, creating space where there wasn't any. Because the longer I stayed in that moment, the more I felt something I couldn't define, something pulling at the edges of everything I had built. And I don't let things pull me. I decide, I move, I control outcomes. That's how I've always survived. But as I stepped away, creating that distance, something unexpected happened. She didn't follow, didn't react, didn't try to hold my attention or bring me back. She just let me go, like it didn't matter. And that hit harder than anything else, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the center of someone's focus. I was just seen and left alone with it. Tell me something. What do you do when someone understands you without needing anything from you? Because that kind of clarity, It doesn't feel safe. It feels like standing in front of a mirror you didn't ask for, one that shows things you've spent years avoiding. And I walked away that night telling myself it didn't matter, that it was nothing. Just a moment, a conversation. Something I could forget the way I forget everything that doesn't serve me. But here's the part I didn't expect. I couldn't. Because something about her presence stayed with me, not emotionally, not in the way people assume. It was quieter than that, more precise, like a question that hadn't been fully asked yet, but was already waiting for an answer. And I had a feeling, the next time our paths crossed, I wouldn't be as in control as I thought. Or worse, I might not want to be. I didn't push her away because I didn't feel anything. I pushed her away because I felt too much. That's the part no one sees. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual. Controlled. The way I do everything. A delayed reply here. A canceled plan there. Conversations that used to have weight, reduced to something lighter, safer, manageable. Because the moment something starts to matter, it becomes a liability. And I don't keep liabilities. At least, that's what I used to believe. There's this night I keep replaying. Not because of what happened, but because of what I almost said. It was late again. Different room this time. Smaller. Quieter. No audience. No distractions. Just a dim light in the corner and the sound of rain hitting the windows like it had something urgent to say. She was sitting across from me, calm as ever, no pressure, no expectations in her posture, and that made it worse. Because when someone doesn't demand anything from you, you're left alone with what you could give. I remember she asked me something simple. Why do you always pull back when things start to get real? No accusation, no edge, just curiosity. And I felt it immediately. That instinct to shift, to redirect, to regain control. But something stopped me. For a second, I considered answering honestly. Not the version of honesty that sounds good. Not the controlled truth I usually offer. The real one. The one I don't even say to myself. Do you know how rare that is? To stand in front of someone and feel the truth rise in your chest and realize you actually have a choice, that you could either reveal it or bury it again. And I hesitated. Because the truth wasn't clean. It wasn't something you say and walk away from unaffected. It was heavy, complicated, exposing. So instead, I leaned back, crossed a line I've crossed 100 times before. I don't think everything needs to be that deep, I said. Calm, controlled, dismissive. She didn't react immediately, just looked at me for a moment, like she was measuring something I couldn't see. Then she nodded, not in agreement, in understanding. And that's what got to me. Because she didn't argue, didn't try to pull me back in, didn't chase the truth I refused to give. She just accepted the distance, like she had already seen it coming. Here's the uncomfortable truth. We don't run from people who don't matter. We run from the ones who have the power to change how we see ourselves. And she did, without trying, without forcing anything, just by being present in a way that made pretending feel pointless. That's why I pulled away harder after that, not softer, harder, because if I stayed close, I'd eventually have to face something I wasn't ready for, that maybe everything I built, every version of myself I perfected, wasn't enough in the one place it actually mattered. And that thought, it shook something I had spent years stabilizing. So I created distance, more silence, more control, more space between who I was and who I could have been with her. And every time I did it, there was this moment, brief, almost invisible, where something in me resisted, like a voice I didn't recognize saying, "Stop." But I didn't listen, because stopping means feeling, and feeling means risk. Tell me something. Have you ever chosen distance over connection? Not because it was right, but because it was easier to live with the question than the answer? Because that's where I was, living in the space between what I felt and what I allowed myself to admit. And the more I avoided it, the clearer something became. She wasn't the one I was afraid of losing. I was afraid of what would happen if she stayed, if she got close enough to see the parts of me I kept hidden even from myself. The doubt, the emptiness, the quiet belief that maybe I had built everything except the one thing that actually makes it meaningful. Connection. Real, unfiltered, uncontrollable connection. And I didn't know how to exist in that without losing the version of myself I had spent years becoming. So I chose what I always choose. Control. Even if it meant losing something I didn't fully understand yet, But here's where it gets complicated. Because the more distance I created, the more I started to feel something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not freedom, something else, something heavier. Like I wasn't protecting myself. I was slowly disconnecting from something I might not get back, and I told myself it was necessary, that this is what strong people do. They don't let emotions interfere with clarity. They don't get pulled into things they can't manage. They stay focused, disciplined, untouched. But there was a flaw in that logic I didn't want to see, because being untouched also means being unreachable. And if no one can reach you, what exactly are you protecting? I didn't have an answer for that. Still don't. All I know is, there was a moment, one specific moment, where everything could have gone differently, where I could have said something real, dropped the control, taken the risk. And I didn't. And what happened after that? It's not something I've ever fully explained, not even to myself, because once you realize you were the one who created the distance, you also have to face what it cost you. And I'm not sure I was ready to understand that yet. She never knew she saved me, and that's the part that still sits heavy, not like guilt, something quieter than that, something that doesn't leave. It was another night, of course it was. These things always reveal themselves when everything else goes silent. The city was dimmer than usual, like even it had decided to pull back. My place felt different too, less like a space I controlled, and more like a place I was just passing through. I hadn't seen her in a while, not because she disappeared, but because I made sure the distance stayed intact. And at first, it felt like control again. Clean, predictable, safe. But then something started happening I didn't expect. The silence changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was loud, not with noise, with memory, fragments of conversations, the way she paused before answering something real, the way she looked at me like she wasn't trying to figure me out, just waiting for me to stop hiding. And I couldn't shake it. You ever try to forget someone who didn't do anything wrong? It doesn't work, because there's nothing to justify the distance. No betrayal, no mistake, just you, choosing absence over honesty. And that kind of decision, it doesn't sit quietly. It questions you. Every time you're alone. I remember standing in the middle of the room, phone in my hand, staring at her name. Not even a message typed, just staring, because I didn't know what I'd say. I pushed you away because I was afraid you'd see the truth. That doesn't sound like a man who has control over his life. That sounds like someone who's been pretending. And that's when it hit me. Harder than anything before it. I wasn't carrying power anymore. I was carrying avoidance. That's the pattern interrupt no one expects. Sometimes the strongest looking decisions are just well-disguised fear, and I had built an entire identity around it. I sat down slowly, phone still in my hand, and let that sink in. All the control, all the distance, all the choices I convinced myself were necessary. They weren't protecting me, they were isolating me, and she, without trying, without knowing, was the only one who disrupted that pattern. Not by forcing her way in, but by making me aware it existed. That's what she saved me from. Not some dramatic ending, not some visible collapse. Something worse. A life that would have continued exactly as it was. Successful, respected, untouched, and completely disconnected. Do you understand how dangerous that is? To live a life where nothing is technically wrong. But nothing is real either. Because if you never feel anything deeply, you never have to face yourself, and I was dangerously close to making that permanent. That's what she interrupted, not with effort, with presence, and she never even knew. That's the part that stays with me, because I never told her, not then, not after. I kept it to myself the way I keep everything that matters, controlled, contained, unspoken. But some truths don't stay where you put them, they surface, in moments you can't predict, like that night. Sitting there, realizing that the one person who shifted something fundamental in me had no idea she did, and I started to question something I had never questioned before. What if the most important things we do for each other are the ones we never get credit for? That thought changes things, because it means she walked away thinking she was just another moment in my life, another passing interaction. While I'm here, carrying the weight of something she never asked to hold. There's an imbalance in that. One I don't know how to fix, and maybe I don't deserve to. That's the uncomfortable truth. Just because someone changes your life doesn't mean you get to be part of theirs. I've had to sit with that, still do. And there are nights, more than I'd admit, where I wonder what would have happened if I had said it. If I had been honest just once. Dropped the control. Took the risk. Let her see the part of me I was so busy protecting. Would she have stayed? Or would that have been the moment she realized I wasn't worth the effort? That question doesn't leave. It lingers, because I never gave her the chance to answer it, and now, I don't know if I ever will. Tell me something. How do you carry gratitude for someone who doesn't even know they changed you? Because saying it now feels too late, and staying silent feels incomplete. So I live in that space, between what happened and what never got the chance to, and the worst part? There's still something I haven't admitted, not to her, not even fully to myself, because if I say it out loud, it changes everything I've told myself about why I let her go. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that, not yet.